Hi there, I'm Colin Morgan, the executive producer of Built to Sell Radio. And if you've been enjoying this podcast, you're going to absolutely love our new newsletter, Built to Sell News. We share actionable tips and insights to help you get inside the mind of an acquirer to punch above your weight when it comes time to exit. To subscribe, head over to builttosell.com/subscribe.
Matt Ebert, welcome to Built to Sell Radio.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me.
How did you get into the business of fixing up cars?
Literally by accident. I wrecked my car when I was 16 and needed to learn how to fix it. And that became then something I wanted to continue with and ended up becoming a career. So pure accident. Wasn't growing up my whole life planning on it. That's for sure.
But it's tricky to fix a car. I mean, like, did you have to go to school to learn how to fix cars? Like, how does that?
Yeah, I had a family friend who was a body tech that did some work in his garage at night. So we're talking in the late 80s at that time. So went there after school and worked for me and after work for him. And he showed me in his garage at home. But then I, went to work on other cars with him, got a job at his body shop that he worked at right after I graduated high school. So there wasn't a lot of classes back then. It was literally learning from the guy next to you and a lot of self-teaching too, just digging in and learning from your mistakes. Now, yeah, cars are very technical. There's a lot of training that's offered around it. Cars are quite different today, as I'm sure everyone can see.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we're really talking about, fixing a car that's been in an accident as opposed to like doing an oil change, right? Like we're talking about body work, that's the kind of stuff that you were doing.
Yeah, Crash Champions is my company, and it is collision repair of modern vehicles. That's what we specialize in. Yeah.
Got it. So how does it go from working at night after school to being the owner of a body shop? Like, tell me about that journey.
Yeah, for me, I always wanted to own my own business. I was an entrepreneur even as a kid. I started with a paper route, with push my lawnmower around town and mow people's lawns for probably what was crazy, ridiculous money, like $5 or something. So there was always that business desire in me. I grew up in a small town in the middle of Illinois, so owning a body shop wasn't even a dream for me, even when I was learning it, because I didn't know anybody. I wouldn't have known how I was even going to get any work in a shop. So I ventured away from collision repair in my early 20s and started a business. I became a Subway franchisee for a minute and literally did that by cash advancing about $100,000 on credit cards. So that's literally like coming from nothing, trying to make something of a business life. I didn't make any money really in the Subway business. So I ended up going back into manage somebody else's body shop. And the gentleman whose shop I was running for a while, we became partners in what was another location that we opened together. So him and I were partners. He was 20 years my senior. So from 99, we opened that one shop together. He had his other shops besides that one. And 2014, he was finally ready to retire and gave me a number to buy him out. So I kind of started growing from just, kind of a half a shop with a partner to having my own shop in 2014 is really where I started the Crash Champions journey of growth.
So when he gave you a number, what was the number based on? Like, was it a multiple of your earnings or profit? I have no idea how collision repair.
Yeah, it was whatever the most he could possibly get. And of course, he financed it for me because, he had that income coming from the business. He wanted to continue to have that for 10 years. So it was literally probably overpaid a little bit, but not really, right? I wouldn't have gotten there without his help to there. And so it was literally just a little bit of what's the business worth over the next 10 years and send me a check for that and move on.
And so how does it go from there? Because you built this up to, I did a bit of research, like 8 or 9 locations before you brought in an investor. Is that right? Am I getting 8 or 9? Is that about right?
Yeah. So after moving on from my first partnership, I started to grow through SBA loans. Had some vendors that would kind of prebate some money to me to help and kind of scrap my way through to those 8 locations. able to do SBA loans on those first several shops. And I was always able to borrow money on the real estate. It was paying somebody for their actual business asset that it's a little difficult to not go to a bank and be able to borrow money for. So having financed the real estate, having had a little bit of seller financing and maxing out the SBA, I had 3 locations lined up for 2019 where I had, LOIs in place, wanted to buy those businesses, and I needed to find another way to borrow money. And I literally went to a small investment banker in Chicago and was looking for just mezzanine debt. I wasn't even thinking about private equity or going that route at all. They encouraged me to be open-minded and listen to the private equity groups and see what they might have to offer. And it wasn't an easy sell for me at first because I just got rid of a partner like 5 years ago. I didn't think doing that was going to be a route I went at all. In fact, the deal that I signed with the investment bank, like I probably paid him way too much because my attorney had warned me, hey, if you do some kind of sale, this is a lot of money. I'm like, well, I'm not selling. I'm not going that route. So it's not going to be an issue. But being open-minded, you always take a meeting. I kind of weigh the pros and cons. So the banker and I, what we did in that instance is we went out to every scenario. Okay, here's some mezzanine debt. Here's how much you can get. Here's what they're going to require. Here's what it's going to cost. Here's some groups that would want to invest with you in the real estate and the business. Here's some groups that would invest in just the business in a minor position. Here's some groups that would want to take over control. I wasn't looking to pull money out. I wanted to grow my business. So for me, taking control was just give up the bare minimum and leave a lot of cash in the business from both them and me. But that set aside, you got the decision to make then once you have all the options. And
yeah, I want to get to that, but there's a couple, you threw in a couple of terms that my listeners may not be familiar with.
Sure.
So I want to define them for them. So SBA, if you're not in the United States, you may not have heard that, is Small Business Administration. It's a form of loan that's backed by the government that can facilitate sales of companies that can be helpful to lubricate this whole process. So you were leveraging SBA loans, and then the sellers of the businesses also chose to accept money over time in the form of seller financing. So they didn't get all their cash up front, they got it over time. So you're kind of juggling SBA loans and seller financing to kind of juggle the money to get enough to buy these businesses. You've got 8 of them and you're going out. You also use the term mezzanine debt. Folks may not be familiar with that. So define what you mean by mezzanine debt or mezz debt.
Yeah, so that literally is a debt that you pay higher interest than you would on, say, a real estate loan where there's a hard asset the bank can come take if you don't pay them. When you're borrowing money for a business, what do they really have to come take from you? Some equipment that's probably not worth much to the bank. It's worth to you a lot to you as a business because you need it to bring revenue. But for them to take it from you and sell it, they're not going to get much on the market for it. So it's ultimately a line of debt that your signature and business guarantees are the only collateral. And so they come with a higher interest rate.
Got it. And so 8 locations, just give me a sense of the size of this company in terms of either a number of employees or revenue or anything you're comfortable sharing. Like, where are you at this stage?
Yeah. So at the 8 locations was about 40 million in revenue. And the 3 that I had lined up to buy were going to bring another, say, 9 million in revenue. So,
wow. So you're 40 million. And what would you put to the bottom line on 40 million?
We're a high single-digit EBITDA business. So 10 is really a good number. So depending on the year, whether it's good or bad, things are rough, somewhere between 8 and 10%.
Okay, so the obvious question is if you're making 5-10% on 40 million, I'm not very sharp with math, but that sounds a lot like 2 to 4 million in profit every year.
Yep.
Why not just take the money, start putting it in your jeans. Like, don't worry about growing this thing. I mean, this sounds like a juggernaut. Why not just like pause and start putting some money in your jeans?
Yeah, great question. My good friends would tell me maybe I have a little bit of what is that where you kind of hate yourself? There's a term for it, right? Like not not narcissism. That's where you think too much of yourself. But
Self-flagellation. I
yeah,
don't know.
right. Yeah, like, well, why you make life so hard on yourself? Kind of a
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
But few things. You you develop some things as you're growing a company that matter. And so, for example, if you can't do it without people. My business is a service business, so the people are the biggest component of your success and how well you do. And good people want to advance. And so if the company stays stagnant, you're probably gonna lose some of those good people because they're gonna want to grow, they're gonna want to do more. So there's just one simple example of why I would want to continue to grow it. And that is because you continue to create opportunity for your team. The other component of it for me was there's risk in staying kind of stagnant too. In my industry, there were some specific things that I can comment on and that
Please do.
is some simple things that are obvious to everybody, but there is a component to it that affects me as a small business. So the complexity of the vehicles, which we all know, the cars that are coming out today compared to 20 years ago, significantly more technology, significantly harder to fix. And that requires a level of investment in equipment and training that would be very hard for me to have by myself been able to keep up with. It's also a consolidating industry that's referred a lot. The business is referred a lot by insurance carriers because
Mhm.
for the most part, some people know exactly who they want to fix their car and where they want to go, but a vast majority are, suggestions are made by the insurance company, and they don't know, they haven't wrecked their car, and their insurance company is kind of the guideline for here's a couple places that you may want to go that we work with. So because of efficiencies and consistency of product and single point of contact, it's so much easier for the carriers to deal with a national company like we are today
Right. So
compared
if you
to,
want insurance deals, you got to be one of the big guys,
yeah. So there was
basically. Yeah.
that amount of work that was being referred to small companies by insurers was shifting. More and more of it was going to the bigger companies as there were some
Okay.
big consolidators. So I could have survived just fine in a niche with some specific accounts and really rock the one market. But the other component of that was as the industry was being consolidated, in Chicago at the time was the most consolidated market in the US from big national collision repair businesses. And so
Huh.
being the guy that wasn't taking any money out, literally investing every dime back into the business, I had a little bit of fear of, well, one day I want to get paid.
Yeah.
If I wait too long to sell and stay small, what would they want to pay me? Because they've got 80 shops here in Chicago already. My 10 to 15 do really well, but they don't really have to have them. So would they be willing to pay what the right price was for my business in the end? So all of those things are why I thought going big was the way to take the business in my industry. I saw risk in just staying that size and getting comfortable. It's really not in my DNA either. I honestly think it's not so much about the money as it is the accomplishment for me. So what drives me, you start your own business because the freedom that it gives you, like there is that, even though you end up working harder than ever, you have this, maybe it's a false sense of freedom because it's self-inflicted, right? You're doing it because it's your choice. So it is a freedom. But for me, like it's my choice because I love the accomplishment of it. And so all of those things just made it was the right move for me to do take on some financial strength and want to grow it big and not just kind of build a small business and live a comfortable life with it.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Thanks for going there with me. So you're in 8 shops, roughly 40 million in revenue. You hire a banker to kind of run a process, and you said, look, bring me anything. Like, I'll look at mezzanine debt, right the way through to like private equity and equity. What came back? Like, what was the breadth of offers that you got?
Yeah, sure. So there were many. So we literally took the top 3 kind of looks in each of those categories. And, from debt, it would have been, here's the interest rate. So you were comparing different interest rates to, some would want warrants in the company, which would mean when you sell, they take 5% of the company, or 2 or 3%, whatever you could negotiate. They would also would have wanted me to form a board, and would want a board seat, either as an observer at a minimum. So, those were some of the kind of offers for the debt. But again, that was limited then the business to just me and me signing up for everything falling on me personally, everything else.
Were they asking for a personal guarantee?
I this was a while back and I don't remember that, but
Okay.
I still have personal guarantees on the real estate, which the rent was being paid to the real estate by the body shop business. So in a way, I'm still on the hook personally, even if for those mezzanine loans, I don't think I would have been. But if the business goes belly up, I still have all this empty real estate sitting there, right? So yeah, I still felt personally at risk for a lot.
And for folks who don't know mezz debt or mezzanine debt, like, what kind of interest rates? It's usually prime plus. So like, what kind of interest rates are you looking at?
So this was in 2019 when interest rates were really, really low, right? But I think as a comparison, real estate loans at that time might have been 4 or 5%. Commercial real estate loans would have been somewhere in the 5% range. And these loans were probably in the 10.5 to 12% range.
Got it. So two at least twice as rich as your real estate loan. Okay.
Yeah.
So you got some debt offers. Then what else did you get?
There were those that would have, gave you 10% of what they thought the company, I'm sorry, from 25% of what the company is worth to all the way up to 75% of what the company is worth. So in that range was those that would be taking minor equity positions, 49% or less, and those that wanted majority equity, 51% up to, I was looking at offers up to 75. Again, for me, I was looking to even leave the money in and on the balance sheet and have the PE group match it anyway, and ended up doing a kind of a 49-51% deal with the first PE private equity group.
I'm assuming you rolled 49. They bought 51%.
Yes.
They bought control.
Yep.
And yet you maintained 49% equity, which so there you didn't pull any money out and put it in your jeans. You just rolled your equity into this. Is that right?
Yeah. So little bit more complicated than that. I did pull some money out for about 6 months because we had another company lined up. Besides the 3 that I had, they were also looking at another business in the collision repair space. So the PE group wanted in the industry. I wasn't the only one they were talking to. They, of course, didn't know if we would come to a deal or not. So they were talking to another group as well. Once we decided that we're going to do a deal together, they brought that deal to me and said, well, how about we buy this one and put it together, put the 2 companies together. So this was 23 shops in Southern California. So we knew all of this prior to closing on my deal, that this was going to be our game plan. And so it was pull the money out, but then I put it right back in to write, as we all came together to write the check for the 23 shop company. And those those sellers also were rolling money. So it ended up being where I went from 8 shops to 39 shops in 6 months. I went from owning 100% of the company to, for a minute, 49%, and then ultimately like about 30%. So the PE group had 51. The owners of the other business ended up having about 18. I ended up having about 30. And I was the CEO and was going to direct how the company was ran, et cetera. And that was a pretty complicated, probably compared to most people's first PE experience. I think it could be a lot simpler than that. But
yeah, you just went way above my pay grade. But I do want to I want to ask you a couple questions about that. So I'm just going to put, I know you're unable to share the exact number, so I'm just going to pull a number out of the air, and let's say the private equity company says, okay, we're going to pay, I'm just going to make a number up, $10 million for your business. We're going to value it at 10 million and we're going to buy 51%. So there's $5.1 million. Do you, and you said, so do you get to put $5.1 million in your pocket? You said, I think, if I understood you correctly, that not all of it went in your pocket. Most of it went on the balance sheet. So it actually was cash in the company that you went to buy additional businesses with. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. Remember I said I kind of put it into my pocket for a minute and then right back in. So, I was trying to like not get too in the weeds and just said onto the balance sheet. But in technicality, it didn't go to the balance sheet. It went to my pocket and then right back in. We did some special moves so that I didn't have tax consequences because I was going to put it right back in. So, but private equity companies spend a lot of money to figure out the tax code and know all the fine workings of all that stuff. But yeah, in effect, look, I don't mind saying that number. Back then, the company was worth $50 million. And so, they were going to put in a certain amount of debt. And let's just use even numbers on this. They were going to write a check for 20 million, and we were going to put 5 million in debt they were going to write a check for 20 million. I was going to leave in equity at 19 million, and we were going to put debt on the company of 10 million. So that all equaled 50. Of the difference between my 19 million and the 15 million, I had debt, all of my existing debt that I had to pay. And then I had the chunk of money that I was going to invest in that next company, which was about a $75 million company that we were buying.
Okay. And so you got to get rid of all those SBA loans and your name, the personal guarantee and all those 8 shops. And what did, well, 2 questions. Did the debt that the company took on at 50 million, the $10 million debt, did you have to personally guarantee that?
No.
Okay. Yeah. And what was it like to get off the personal guarantee hook?
I never really thought about that because I would feel just as bad of it failing no matter what. And I almost felt from a perspective of, look, I just took institutional money now and I'm not going to let those guys down. And I also, in the Southern California deal acquisition that we did, where those guys rolled significant money and now they were partners too. I had 2 real life, they're friends of mine now, right? These are 2 other partners that I now feel personally responsible for not letting down. So I don't know if it relieved me of any I'm not on the hook anymore. I almost put myself under more of a personal pressure to succeed. But it's not in me to not make good on debt anyhow. I do understand that sometimes things happen and it's impossible. And that's why bankruptcy and stuff exists. But from a personal level, I wasn't looking to be off of the hook. It wasn't an important thing to me, but it is a benefit of the PE environment and stuff. It gets you out of that situation to where you are personally guaranteeing stuff. Now, fast forward another few years from now, when I've started to take some money out of the company and stuff, it's going to be way different world for me then, because now I'm at a point to where I want to protect assets, right? So back then I had nothing to lose. Everything was into the company, so it wasn't like I had other things at risk in my life. It was really just the company is all I had besides our
But maybe,
home. So
yeah, but maybe help me understand, because I mean, it was worth a lot of money.
mhm.
Was there any temptation to take the 19, pay off the SBA loans, and and just and just become an employee of the private equity group, or become an employee of Crash Champions and not necessarily roll all that equity back in? Like, are you married? Are you still married? Because I'm sure
Great
your
question.
spouse at this point is like, Matt, can we at least put a few shekels away so that it's sort of protected? Like, did that not cross your mind, or conversations with your spouse?
Not yet. No. She, you know, I was newly married at the time, so we got married in 2017, and so we were only 2 years in. So although my wife and I have a great relationship, it wouldn't have been where she would have been weighing in that. She's not that vested yet, right? In all of that
Okay,
building of it, to where she would have stop me from wanting to grow the company. Today, that conversation might sound a little different. She's sacrificed a lot, and my kids have given up a lot of time with me in the growing of
sure.
this business. I'm sure when the next opportunity comes to sock some money away for the family, she's going to have a different, stronger opinion, which she's definitely, in my opinion, entitled to. Without her support and all of this, it couldn't have worked. So,
Yeah,
that's a very
and this
real
thing is
question, right?
and this thing has become like a juggernaut. Like, you've now got, I was doing a little bit of like 600 locations of Crash Champions. Is that right? Am I getting them? That's nuts. This thing's gone from 8, like Chicago. I mean, a successful business unto itself. Now you got 600 locations.
Yeah, we went from 8 to 645, I think, today, in just exactly 5 years, actually. So from 8 to 645, and we're about 2.8 billion in revenue. So that's
Unbelievable.
taken a lot of growth, right? In literally, and in personal growth and capability too, in order to do that. So
What's the
that's been the
biggest
excitement of
difference?
it.
What's the biggest difference between, like, I'd be curious to know, for a lot of our listeners, they've heard the stories of Bill Gates and Elon Musk who've gone and started companies and grown them to be massive businesses. But I think for most of them, um, they're good at the startup phase, right? The first couple million in revenue, the first 10 or 20 employees. But beyond that, it's like, this thing's now way bigger than I want to or care to manage. What did you learn, and what makes the difference between a small entrepreneurial run company that you own 100% of to a $2.8 billion company? Like, what's that? Like, what are the skills that you personally have had to learn?
Oh, great question. So your financial acumen is tremendously better. you, from embarrassingly, and maybe not, like, you only know what you know, right? But once we did when I did partner up with that first PE firm, and that, they're making suggestions, and they said, Matt, have you ever thought about adding an FP&A position or function to the business? And I'm like, well, what is that? And now, of course, to me, that's a silly question, just because of where we are today. And there's so
What does
much
FP&A stand for? What does that stand
financial
for?
planning and analysis. So,
So the
it's the
projections,
and
budgets.
analysis of the business and how you're doing. And uh, don't get me wrong, we had financial numbers to manage the business too. I just didn't know that title, and I also didn't know the level at which, private equity, in my case, and big business looked at numbers and levers. And so you become much smarter at the levers of the business than you do. Of course, when it's not just you as an owner, you become much more disciplined, because it was easy for me when it was just me to forgive a bad month and say, we'll go get them next month, where now I've promised other people the month's going to be good. So there's a different level of urgency maybe on my part. I mean, the things that I've had to learn are tremendous. It would be the difference of, we have syndicated debt now, to where you're going and talking to Wall Street analysts to raise debt for the company. So the level of my business conversations is way elevated compared to what it was back then. But to get here, look, I didn't go to a day at college, so it's not impossible. Like you learn from those around you. The great thing about being the founder and the entrepreneur, like I'm not auditioning for my next CEO job, right? And so I was never worried about my position or worried about bringing people smarter than me in, as far as into the executive committee of the company. And so my COO, for example, was the first big hire that we made when we were going to buy that company in Southern California, become 39 shops in 2020. We recruited a gentleman that's our COO today. He came from running 330. And I only know how silly that must have been for me to be that presumptuous that I could get him to come work for me at 39 shops when he's running 330. But he saw something in me and what we were trying to do. And he ended up taking that jump. I know today what a risk he took in leaving the big company where he didn't have to leave to come in to work with me. But he's been greatly rewarded for taking that risk too. So, bringing in people who have been where I haven't been so I could learn from them has been an excellent move for me. And you're constantly reading and everything else too, but really putting experienced people around you is a huge benefit.
You've obviously learned through the School of Hard Knocks the financial acumen, the sophistication. Now you're talking to Wall Street analysts and so forth. As you look back on Matt from 2019, what mistakes did you make in selling that you would never make today?
I really didn't remember. I wasn't even looking to sell. I was just looking to borrow money. So I didn't have the chance to get organized and say, hey, what should my business look like? How should it look from a seller, from a buyer? How do I make it look good? Because I wasn't trying to do that. So I probably, in the end, could have made those first 8 shops worth much more money if I'd have known what I was doing and if I'd have had that as my intent. And in most of the time, unless there's a strategic reason to buy your business where you have some other intrinsic value, EBITDA drives a lot of things. There's other components, but in my world at the time, EBITDA was the determiner of the value of my business. And we closed in July and we had put up a horrible number in April, and I didn't even know that was a bad thing. I didn't even know I was hurting the value of my business because I had a bad April compared to the April the year before, because they're looking at a trailing 12 look, right? So I was fortunate in that I was just doing the right things, building a great business, and it ended up being that the math worked out for me. But today it would be much more specific intent to controlling cost and driving the right levers to get the EBITDA number optimized for the optimal sale price, because that's what the driver was for me at the time. I didn't know that. Fortunately, the numbers worked out in a good way, but now I would be very specifically intent on driving the right things to create value for the business, which I kind of just by dumb luck got there. Not dumb luck. I was just instinctually building a good business. and it ended up, the math worked out. Now I would not just build a good business. I would make sure the math worked out.
You built it to 600 locations. Most of those have been through acquisition. Is that correct?
Yes. There's been several that have been greenfields, and some of my early shops were greenfields. The first one, of course, and then of the first 8, three of them were greenfields. But yeah, we want the business kind of in the future to get to kind of a 50-50 mix or 60-40 mix of organic greenfield locations from scratch compared to M&A. But the speed at which we grew, it's obvious that had to be through M&A. We couldn't have done that organically, not that fast.
Why do you want to change the proportion?
Because then you build a new location. You're not taking a body shop in the condition that it's in. You're building it to your specifications, and you're not paying anything for the business. So you have the ramp up to endure, right? Going from zero in sales to whatever it can do. But we're at this, the position now where we've got good relationships. We know we can bring accounts to the shop. We know that we can get our name out there. We're already in the marketplace, so we're going to open a shop in a market where we're already recognized. And so for us, it's a way to make sure that we're growing the business, nice new locations that we can ramp. And then you're not writing a check to someone else for the business that they built. We're building it. But I think there's a right mix of it. You can't just go 100% that way either, because a big component of the business for us, or the whole component, is the people. And so you need technicians, and you need managers, and you need service advisors to write the estimates. And so in an M&A world, acquisitions, the employees that are there in that business, you go in with the intent to make sure you retain them, and when you're opening new locations, you either have to recruit all of them or grow and train them all. So it's the people factor that makes it impossible to go just a completely organic growth model unless you're going to go really slow.
And what's a typical acquisition model look like for you? Are you looking for, the classic sort of PE model I've seen is similar to the one that you did, where the PE will buy a majority of the business, but they'll ask the selling owner or owners to roll some equity into the new entity they create. Is that the model you guys are using, or are you buying them outright, or what's the economics look like?
Yeah, there's been a mix of that. We can buy them outright, but in some businesses that we've acquired, take a smaller multi-shop owner that might own 6 to 10 locations. Him rolling some money into Crash Champion stock both works for him, in that we're going to continue to grow the company. That money is going to continue to grow. He doesn't have to pull it out and pay the taxes on it immediately. He'll have the tax consequences when he takes it out. So there's advantages to the seller of not taking all the money out, rolling some, and us growing it. And from our perspective, when we're doing it that way, we go then and introduce ourselves to his team. He's not saying, "Hey, I sold the business, I'm out." He's basically saying, "Look, I found an opportunity for me and for you. We're going to sell the Crash Champions, but I'm going to continue on with some ownership." And the team doesn't know if he rolled $20 million or $1 million. That's irrelevant. It's just the fact that he's going to continue to be part of the company. And so that's been a great avenue for us to leverage the loyalty of the team to that owner, to that seller. Whereas if it were just an outright purchase price and I'm out of here, we wouldn't have gotten that kind of loyalty from the team that kind of stuck around. So out of the 130 acquisitions that we've done to get to this number of shops, only less than 30 of them have been where we rolled money. It isn't something that we've done often, but we've done deals like that. We've done deals where the seller will finance we'll finance some. And again, that works out well because we pay a pretty good interest rate, probably better than they're going to do just taking the money and putting it in a money market or something. And again, the tax consequences are avoided for a minute, but the majority are outright purchases.
Got it.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that you have acquired businesses that are what I'll call professionally run. I hate to use that term. I'm using it in air quotes, but they've got what people that went to fancy business schools, and they've got financiers on the board, and like you're buying a professionally run company. And then I'm guessing there are other situations where you're buying kind of an owner operated shop. Maybe the gal didn't go to fancy university, but they've kind of up by the bootstraps. Is it fair that you'd have both of those sorts of companies that you've acquired over years?
Most of them are the owner operator bootstrapped it. Most of them are baby boomer generation that built this business and their kids either don't want it or aren't capable of running it, or a mixture of both. And they've come to that point where they want to look to sell. And so there's not a lot of sophistication. Even in that, there's a big variance in sophistication. Of some of them are literally giving you paperwork on a napkin, and some are giving you pretty sophisticated financials. And ultimately, buying either one of them has worked for us. The guys who are more sophisticated, the financials are more supportable. They end up getting paid better because what we're doing is in a range of paying the most we could possibly pay to the least. There is the shops that aren't very nice. The financials aren't very clean. I call it a realignment number. Post sale to us, the way the shop operates today, how does it compare to how we're going to operate it once we own it? And if it's a beautiful shop operating exactly like we would operate it anyway, you would give that a 10 in a realignment number. It's a perfect score. You're probably going to pay a lot more we're going to pay more for that than we are a business where we look at it and go, oh, the facility is terrible. The undisciplined financially, the owner is running it himself, and now we're going to need to put a manager in there. They're in our case, we're an insurance friendly business. They're not insurance friendly at all. Like that would be the extreme of where we give that a 2. We know we can turn the location into something that's going to take us a couple years. We would buy that business too, but what we pay for it's going to be far less than what we pay for the better one.
And give me a sense of the range of multiples. I know you don't want to talk multiples per se, but like on your 2 and 10 scale, would the 10 be worth twice as much as the 2, or 3 times as much as the 2?
Yeah, I would say that's a good twice as much.
Like 2 to 3 times. Yeah, twice as much.
Twice to 3 times. Yeah. Yep.
Wow. Okay. That's super helpful. The other thing we talked about before we hit record, you're in an industry that's going through this consolidation, right? Private equity is coming in and snapping up these collision repair businesses. We talked about this notion of musical chairs. You want to just talk a little bit about that and how you think about the kind of musical chairs element of this?
Yeah, a great question. So in my research and decision making on even doing the private equity route in the first place, excuse me. My research taught me that when industries consolidate, they consolidate to about 65% of the total market, and then they stop. And I believe various businesses for different reasons, but rural America has a lot to do with that, where mom and pops are probably going to survive a lot longer than in an urban environment, so to speak. But 65% is about max when you look at how much is the industry going to consolidate. And then that means that 2 or 3 big national players and some, a handful of regional players control 65% of that market. For me, looking at the pace that the collision industry was consolidating, my fear was that from 2019, 10 years from then, 2029, 2030, when I might look at have just holding on to the business, running it myself, and staying, that original company where I was the only owner. I was in fear that the industry might be better than 50% consolidated at that time. And that's what I meant by looking to the future. When I did find it time to exit the business, retire, spend the time with my family that they deserve, would I get the value for my business at that time? Because I would have, in my view, I think I would have waited too long to where the industry's already consolidated up. There's not a buyer for. I would have eliminated a strategic buyer because they don't need it. I would have eliminated a private equity buyer because they wouldn't have seen a path to grow. And so I'm not sure, maybe employees could have bought it from me or something, but I didn't want to. It didn't make sense to do that, to hold on to where the party was over.
Yeah. So these roll-ups, and a lot of my listeners are in an industry where it's rolling up right now, right? Like veterinary clinics, or, like you name the industry, there's probably a private equity company looking at it, whether it's worth doing a roll-up. And so knowing where you are in the life cycle of that roll-up, it sounds like, is important, and making sure if you're interested in exiting, you're not too far into the tail end of the roll-up window, so to speak.
Yeah, I would even go a little further than that too. There's that overall kind of beginning to end of when the money's going to be spent on paying people for their business, but there's ebbs and flows of it in the middle. So, for example, we took on we purchased, part of how Crash Champions got this big was we purchased Service King out of what was really bankruptcy. So that was 330 locations, with a whole bunch of debt that we kind of negotiated to take over the company and then improve it. Well, the pace of acquisitions that we were doing prior to that was much, much faster. We were 200 shops taking on 330 that aren't making money. We had our hands full. And so we weren't running out trying to buy another 200 locations the next year. And then in an environment, say, that we've faced the last couple of years where interest rates got really, really high, even our competitors slowed down the pace that they were acquiring. So there's not just the overall, how much is your total industry consolidated? The big players in your industry, what is their current situation? Are they, to go from my case of 40 million to 2.8 billion, there's been a private equity partner change in that. And that happens for all companies. The investors grow it a little while and then sell it to the next group of investors. And so in an example where a big company is making sure that everything is clean and ready for the sale to the next investor, they're going to slow down their speed of acquiring. Or maybe they've just sold and now they have fresh money and now they really want to ramp up their speed of acquiring. You want to recognize those trends to take a look at when you sell, because I always tell people that there's an optimal time to sell your business. A lot of times the optimal time is when somebody wants to buy it. Like if somebody wants to buy it, you should probably have the conversation, because things change. There is a good chance that a year from now they'll pay you less because their internal kind of thesis has changed for various reasons, whether they're slowing down the growth or speeding it up, whether the marketplace has changed, whether they've taken a management or board change and have a different theory on how they're going to grow the business from here. So you always, to me, want to look at it when somebody's knocking on your door to buy it. It's worth the conversation, and don't always kid yourself into thinking you'll get more tomorrow. It's not always true.
I can't help but that's super helpful. So the best time to buy a business is when someone's best time to sell a business is when someone's buying. Got it. As you talk, I can't get over, I'm still stuck on this. Like, you strike me as the kind of guy who is an entrepreneur's entrepreneur, right? Like you're doing things in high school. You got a delivery route, you wreck your car, you fix it up, you like borrow all this money from the STA to buy Subway sub franchises. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you're like an entrepreneur, right? Like all through and through. And now you're like talking to Wall Street about, like to me, this is like a non sequitur. This is like a personality complete head change to go from an entrepreneur who's borrowing on credit cards to buy a Subway sub franchise to talking about syndicated debt with Wall Street analysts. Like, how have you lasted? Has it been this like a lobotomy? Like, how have you possibly lasted in these two different phases of this company? It's blowing my mind. I just don't understand it.
It is. I viewed it this way. So in some ways, yes, but in other ways, no. So I don't run things differently than I did if it were just, I have to get more intelligent, right? I have different experiences. Problems are bigger. I'll speak to that in a minute. But my attitude toward, hey, this is mine. In my head, it's not doing the math of what percentage I own compared to 100. I run it like I own 100. I'm trying to build the best, most awesome company. And there's something to be said about being founder led. It's one of the things that we talk about externally, internally that makes us unique is we're the only one in our industry of this size that is founder led. I don't own 100% of it. Don't pretend that I do, but the founder ledness means like I've done every position in the shop. Like I'm not coming to work with some crazy idea to make your job harder, to ask you to do something that's impossible. It's my baby, and I'm proud or ashamed of whatever is good or bad about it.
But it's hard to hear your baby's ugly. Like when the private equity guys on your board say, Matt, like, what are you doing here? Like, why did you miss your numbers? Why is this the way it is? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? Isn't that hard for you to take?
Well, number one, don't you know it anyway? Like,
come on,
like,
it's gotta be hard. When some Wall Street guy with a fancy suit that went to the right school says to Matt, "What are you doing? Why did you do this?" That's got to be hard to hear.
Sure. Nobody likes criticism, right?
Sure.
But I truly don't view them as my boss. I view them as my partner. So, to me, I'm super transparent. I'm not trying to survive the board meeting and tell them one thing so that I don't have to deal with them. Like I'm letting them know what we're working on, what we see as risk, what we see as opportunities. I treat them like a partner that can help me if there's something that they know about the problems that we're facing. And that's not it for me. What's been the challenge for me is it's just growing myself to manage the problems. Like everything gets bigger. And I mean, I can take it to simple examples that to make it really jump out. I, in 20 years of owning my business, had one employee die. Now, because of sheer numbers, we have 10,000 employees. Unfortunately, we have an employee not on the job, but because of natural or other causes, pass away once a month or so. Like I dealt with that once in 20 years. Now it's a monthly thing. Now, that's just one little example to show like how much things get bigger and change. But you also have a team of that's there managing stuff with you. So I viewed it as this: I can't be the bottleneck for the company, or else my investment's worth way more than the job. I'm going to fire myself first. So the company would be a $5 billion company as soon as I'm ready to run a $5 billion company. And so the race for me is to get myself in that space to where whatever I might be lacking, I can develop between now and then. And it's just been as simple mindset as that for me. Simple. I say things like a level 2 person can't solve a level 8 problem. It's way too hard for them. So my challenge to myself has always been to grow myself bigger than my problems, because the problems are where the opportunities lie. The problems are what you need to solve to continue to do well. So whatever problem I'm facing, that's where I do my research. That's what I go, who's faced this before? Who's wrote a book about it? Who can I call? It's really, to me, like, what are the challenges ahead and who's faced them? Where can I do some research on it? And then I feel that has equipped me pretty well to so far. I imagine there's the day where the problem too big comes along, but for now.
My money's on Matt Ebert. Listen, I really appreciate you spending so much time that you did with me and entertaining my questions. I know we're gonna have listeners who want to reach out to you. Do you accept like LinkedIn connection requests, or are you a social media guy at all? Like, what's the best way for folks to reach out?
Yeah, LinkedIn is perfect. Really, any social media platform, I'm on them all. Matt Ebert CC is the handle to find me. So reach out to any of them. That would be awesome.
Matt, thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me, John.